and welcome to Theater Charlotte's first TC Teachables. This week we have Ron Law, our executive director, and he's going to be talking to you about acting. If you have any questions for him, he will answer questions at the end, so you can put those in the Facebook comments, and I will relay those to Ron. So without further ado, here is Ron.
Thank you, Jackie. Yes, as she said, I'm Ron Law. I'm the executive director at Theater Charlotte and have been for 15 years. A little bit about my background, and for those that know me or have worked with me, I will not be doing any name dropping. I was an undergrad theater student at Kent State University in Ohio. I have a Master of Fine Arts degree in acting and directing from UNCG. I had 2 years of observer status at Actors Studio in New York City during Lee Strasberg's tenure, and I also studied at HP Studios in New York City. So let's just dive in and do what we can do in talking about acting in such a short time frame. I'm assuming that everyone knows that in acting there's an essential difference between acting and the other arts, because as an actor you are your own instrument. You reach your audience using your own voice and your own body. So the need for solid training vocally and physically is obviously important and can never be neglected. And when I'm talking about training vocally, I don't necessarily mean singing. Although even if you don't consider yourself a singer, voice lessons are very good because it helps you with diction. Diction is also very important, articulation and projection. Today's actors sometimes are lacking in the skills of projection and articulation. An actor also needs solid technique, and that's primarily what I'm going to be talking about today and hopefully in the future. As for technique, I mean using your own inner resources, learning to use your own inner resources to create a character which the playwright has developed. Now, what inner resources am I talking about? Well, your inner resources are everything that you have ever seen or felt in your life. That's why actors often journal. They often carry a journal, so when they experience something, they can write down the feelings, what they saw, what they heard, etc., so that you always have something to draw back upon and something to help remember these things. You can use in the creation of a character in a play or a film only what you can understand in terms of your own knowledge and your own feelings. You are dependent on your voice and body to express what you feel, but you are also dependent on the experiences you have accumulated within yourself to supply what the character feels. There are two approaches to acting, inside out and outside in, and I fully believe that both are important. Okay, let's suppose that you are cast in Romeo and Juliet. So first you begin by taking stock of what you have within yourself that can help you in creating one of these very famous characters. What must be foremost in your mind is the desire to create a character in which you, the other actors, and the audience can believe. Acting is believing. It's not pretending, it's believing. Begin by searching for something in each scene which you know from your own experience is true. Begin by asking yourself, now what would I do if I were in the same situation as Romeo or Juliet? For instance, what would I do if the man I loved had just killed a dear cousin? What would I do if I were banished from my country after only being married a few hours? What would I do if my parents discovered my secret marriage, which they were opposed to? So you ask yourself these questions, but you ask them as if you were in that situation. How would you react? And then you need to be able to move that, mesh that in with what the playwright has given you. You find these answers within yourself. You must recall your own experiences to discover how your past actions will help you to know what you would do in these situations. It is not necessary that you discover at once what your actions would be throughout an entire scene. Determine first what you would do at some particular point and then go from there. Moment by moment is how an actor works through a script. Would you want to express your love in close physical contact, or would you hold yourself apart? Back to Romeo and Juliet. Would you hold yourself apart, building your courage for the time when you must be alone? So would you, as the actor, express your love in close physical contact, or would you hold yourself apart? Would you want to prolong the joy of being together, or would you want to make the farewell brief to lessen the pain of parting? Would you be more concerned with your love or with the danger at that moment? So these are questions that as an actor you ask yourself. How would I react in that situation? How would I react if I were Romeo in that situation? How would I react if I were Juliet in that situation? So to find the answers, you must do an exploration of yourself. Actors have to truly, really know themselves. They have to know themselves vocally. How can they grow vocally? What are their limitations? Also physically. What can you do physically and what are your limitations? Also, you have to do an exploration of yourself as far as your past experiences. If you find your actions would be identical with those of the character you're playing, well, the task is really easy. If you find that your actions would be quite different, well, you could still play the character with truth and sincerity, two important words in acting, truth and sincerity, as the writer conceived. It takes more work and it takes further self-exploration. With self-exploration, you can find in your own experiences similar feelings. Now, these feelings may not be what the playwright suggests that the characters are going through at the time, but you identify those feelings and then identify what caused those feelings in you. But also remember, you cannot act feelings, all right? You have to know what they are and then learn how to deal with them physically. Okay, for instance, if your character accidentally kills someone, sorry about the little analogy, but hopefully you may have never experienced that. But you may have accidentally killed an animal or even an insect, a butterfly, an animal an insect that doesn't freak you out. So explore what you felt at that moment. And also, as importantly, what did you do physically at that moment? Did you run and hide? Did you cover your eyes? Did you cover your face? Did you fight back tears? How did you fight back tears? Examine what you did physically at that moment. It is necessary for you as an actor to believe in what you are doing, as your first responsibility to your audience is to induce their belief in your actions. So if, for instance, if you were in a scene where your character's foot falls asleep, your objective, your goal at that moment is not to make it look as if your foot fell asleep. It is to make yourself believe your foot is asleep. So your audiences will believe your foot is asleep. So how do you do this? How have you reacted when your own foot has really been asleep? So what you need to do is recreate this moment. Think back to when your foot was asleep. How did you react? Recreate that moment. This leads to truth in acting, so that you're not really faking that your foot is asleep. Everything that you do physically is what you would really do if your foot were asleep. Now, enough with your foot being asleep for now. We'll come back to your foot being asleep momentarily. Now, when you were a kid and you played at being a king or a brave leader, or played with your Barbies or mud pies, you believed what you were doing was real. Your actions were very real to you. I remember, it was a long time ago, but I remember when I was a kid, and actually we would get angry at each other if we broke that sense of truth, that sense of belief that what we were doing was real. So to understand the nature of believing in the games you played and the nature of believing on stage, it's necessary to distinguish between the real, what's realistic, and what is true or truthful. For instance, again, going back, if as a child you were playing that you are king and you're on a throne, and you're outdoors, you have some old kitchen chair, some old chair that you scrounged out of the garage, and that is your throne. It's not really a throne, just some sort of chair, but you treat it truthfully as if it were a real throne. You sit in it as if you were the king. Or if you're mocking the king is not around, and the character, as a kid that you were playing, is mocking the king, then you just throw yourself in the chair, but you treat that chair as if it were a real throne. Another example, the worlds of Star Wars. They're not real. I know some people will get angry when I say that, but as an actor, you inhabit that world truthfully, believing that all of it is real, and you react appropriately. So it's not a realistic world, but you have to make it such for your character, so that everything that you do, you would do truthfully in that world. Now, sustaining belief on stage is difficult. You have to work in front of an audience, and you're in the middle of all the distractions of a live production. You have people backstage, perhaps talking too loudly, whispering too loudly. Somebody drops a prop off stage. The lights change. Somebody in the audience coughs incessantly. Somebody laughs inappropriately. Oops. So you have all these distractions. But you must be able to concentrate and to repeat your belief whenever you are required to do so. If you treat your throne as the chair it really is, then you destroy that belief in that moment. And then the audience is separated from you and from that world. You must treat everything in the world that your character occupies truthfully. Now, once in a play, I was supposed to be eating a delicious steak and mashed potatoes, and I believe peas. Peas are not something you should ask an actor to try to handle on stage, because they're little, they're round, they fall off your fork or your spoon. But I believe that's what it was. However, due to budget constraints, the steak was not really steak. It was actually a hunk of brown bread. The mashed potatoes were from a box, and they were cold, and the gravy on them had congealed. And I believe there were some real cold peas also on the plate. So I had to dive into this meal and eat it as if it were delicious. So I had to remember I don't eat meat any longer, but I thought back to when I had a delicious steak, a filet, a New York strip, a sirloin. And I also had to know you don't cut a piece of brown bread as you would a steak. So I had to think about and recreate how I cut a steak, so that I cut this dry piece of brown bread, put it in my mouth and chew it as if it were a steak and not a piece of brown bread that was coming up and sticking to my teeth. And I had to really, and I do love mashed potatoes, and I really had to love these cold mashed potatoes. The peas I sort of left aside because I knew if I lifted them up, the peas would fly all over. So to the audience, this was a delicious meal for me because I thought back and used my inner resources and recreated a lovely steak dinner from what was far from a lovely steak dinner. Now, here are some exercises that you could do at home on your own. Now we get back to the sleeping foot. Okay, so imagine that you are in the presence of someone you want to impress favorably, and you are afraid that your foot being asleep will make him think you are clumsy and uncoordinated. So how would you deal with that in that situation? Okay, think back how you would react if your foot was really asleep, how you personally did, and that you were in this situation of somebody you were really trying to impress and your foot is asleep and you don't want them to think that you are clumsy. So work on that. Work on that at home and see what happens. Another one, you are expecting an important phone call. The phone rings. The numbness of your foot being asleep makes it impossible for you to hurry to the phone. So there you go. So see what happens with that. But do it truthfully. Don't don't jump up and fall down, and if that's not what you would do. And you know what people do, what you would do with your foot is asleep. The last one, you may have recently been told by a doctor that you have a serious disease, the first symptom of which is numbness in your feet and legs, and your foot is asleep. So work on that. So you've got 3 to work on. You're in the presence of somebody you want to impress favorably. Then your foot is asleep. You are expecting an important phone call. The phone rings and you can't hurry to the phone because your foot is asleep. Or you've recently been told by a doctor that you have a serious disease and the first symptom is numbness in your feet and legs. So supplying new circumstances helps renew the actor's belief, because when you ask yourself, what would I do if I were in such a situation? Then you find the true answer. You're provided with the reasons for the new action. So also something else that you can do at home is to find a play in which there is a role that you want to play. Choose a scene. Study the circumstances of the scene. And when I talk about circumstances, I'm talking about where specifically does it take place? Not just New York City or Charlotte, but where in New York City or where in Charlotte. When specifically does this take place? What year? What era? What season? What month? What time of day? Also, who are you? Who are you dealing with? And what? What is going on? What are you doing moment by moment? So always ask yourself when you're studying a script, what would I do if I were in this situation? So work on it and improve your technique. So 20 minutes have gone by and I have reached the end of my discussion. So I would like to bring Jackie back on to see if there are any questions.
I have not seen any questions come in, but the good news is that Ron is on Facebook a lot. So if you guys have any questions, you can post them in the comments and he'll see them and he'll answer them.
Yes, I will. I will indeed. I hope this was a teachable moment. It's tough to talk about acting in such a short amount of time, but I wanted to give a basic introduction about technique. Uh, and I found myself talking so fast, and I thought, oh, I hope people can absorb this as fast as I was talking. But I hope to come back in the future and continue on with this discussion about acting technique.
I think we can arrange that. I know a person.
You think?
Abby Driscoll says you're awesome.
Well, you're more than welcome, Abby Driscoll. Thank you for watching. I appreciate that. And Abby, if you do have any questions, then let me know. As Jackie said, I am occasionally on Facebook.
Sometimes. So, all right, guys, we'll be back again next week, Tuesday at 4 p.m. with another special guest.
That won't be me.
It won't be Ron, probably. All right, thanks, everybody.
Bye.